Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View.
And good Sunday morning to you. Welcome into Capitol View. I'm Jay Bir. The state responding to coronavirus cases popping up here in Arkansas. The governor declaring a state of emergency. Here to make sense of the impact, Dr. Jennifer Dillaha. Unfortunately, you guys have all gotten to know her, I assume, which is kind of a bad sign here, but she's the medical director for immunization and outbreak response. Also joined along there is Michael Pakko, chief economist and state economic forecaster from the U of A Little Rock, to kind of help us make sense of some of the economic impacts of this virus. Dr. Dillaha, we'll start with you. Is there anything more that we know about this virus and kind of how it acts, or some of the sciencey stuff behind coronavirus?
Well, we're still learning about it, and there's still much we don't know. Right now, the important questions are, one, what works to treat this virus? And there are studies that are ongoing to see what is the best evidence for what is the best way to treat people. And then the second thing, of course, is we want a vaccine. And we have companies, several companies actually in the U.S. that are pursuing a vaccine, and at least two of them that I'm aware of have the vaccine ready to go into clinical trials this next month. But those clinical trials take some time. They have to test whether they're safe and whether they actually work. And those trials will probably take at least a year and a half.
And just kind of a review here, what are some of the symptoms that you'll find if you believe you've come into contact with the coronavirus?
So this virus causes respiratory illness and pneumonia. So people will usually have a fever and then cough or shortness of breath. It can be very mild, so people don't actually get pneumonia, right, or it can be very severe and then lead people to have respiratory failure, and then the pneumonia makes it unable for them to breathe, and then they die.
And then quickly here, what are the testing capabilities right now of the state? I know they've been partnering up with sort of the commercial labs and everything, yes, but we've seen some of these other states and even other countries where they have drive-through testing, yes, going on. What's it look like currently in the state, and where are we trying to get it to?
Well, most of the lab testing has been available through the Arkansas Department of Health recently. But now many health systems, hospitals, and facilities are coming online with the commercial tests that are now available through the commercial labs. And some of those systems are developing their own drive-through evaluations, because of course people don't need just testing for COVID-19. Right. They need to be evaluated. It could be the flu, it could be strep throat, it could be something else. So they want to get the right care, not just COVID-19 testing. Right. So many of the health facilities are working very hard and very rapidly to make those tests available, and doing it in a way that it doesn't expose other patients to people who may be sick with the virus, and of course we don't want to transmit that.
And you brought up not exposing other people. I know the governor on Friday really made a point to say, if you feel you have symptoms and you think you need to be tested, don't go to the ER.
Yes. So some of the hospitals are setting up a system separate from the ER, right, because we don't want people who have severe other problems that need attention to be missed because there's so many people with mild illness that need testing. So we want people, if they are ill, to call their normal, regular doctor. And their doctor can advise them whether they have the testing or where to go. But we also want people who may have this virus, or any virus like flu, respiratory symptoms, not to expose other patients. So before they enter any facility, they must ask for a mask, a surgical mask. They put that over their nose and mouth, and then that helps keep them from spreading the virus. It's spread by respiratory droplets that people spew out when they cough or sneeze, right, and the mask blocks that.
All right, so there you have it here. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum here. Bring you in here, Michael. And it's just been a volatile week in terms of stocks and the markets and everything here. How do we kind of make sense of this sort of wrapped around the coronavirus?
Well, it's been kind of a rough month altogether.
Well, yeah.
I think the public perception and economists' view of how this is impacting the economy has evolved along with the stock market decline. Early on, we were seeing primarily supply disruptions, with China being shut down, and that would cause bottlenecks in production here, and that would cause some problems. Then we had the oil issue, where there's a glut of oil on the market now because of the reduced production in China. That caused some concern about oil company stocks and even bank stocks. And more recently, what we're seeing is, in addition to those supply side problems, there's now a threat to the demand side of the economy, as consumers stay home, don't go out and do the things they always do, don't buy the things they usually do. And so we've kind of, the concern is that we've got a double whammy here. We've got a supply shock and a demand shock hitting the economy at the same time. Now, of course, both fiscal and monetary policy are actively trying to confront these issues. But right now, it's looking like it's going to have an impact on the economy in a negative way over the next couple of quarters. It's still uncertain as to how severe it's going to be, depending on how long the effects last, or how long the disruptions really affect us.
It seemed that things bounced back in a big way, almost 10% on Friday. What do we make sense of that? Because I know once Trump addressed the nation, it kind of seemed to sort of calm nerves.
Well, you know, there's a lot of volatility here. There's one thing that investors really don't like is uncertainty. And so whenever we see every little piece of news, in a sense, there's kind of overreaction to every last bit of information. And there's also, I think, a tendency of people, even stock traders, to view very unlikely but terrible events with more gravity than they actually should be. So any bad news tends to get exaggerated in the markets, and good news, then we bounce back a little bit. But you're right, Friday we saw a respite from the losses of earlier in the week. Not enough to make back any of the ground, but it was encouraging that having seen some of the public responses to this, that the stock market was encouraged toward the end of the week.
And what do you think about sort of, we had a couple things here, you know, Italy kind of shutting a lot of it down, and then also to Canada basically tabling their budget. Do we see any maybe long-term effects with that, or is that kind of sort of a separate issue when it comes to sort of the big picture?
Well, I think some of that is going to depend on what kind of agreement we eventually see between the Congress and the President, and what kind of fiscal responses that we're going to have from the federal government on this. Some of them could be long-lasting, of course, that's even more uncertain right now than how long the virus effects are going to last. So it's kind of hard to say what the long-lasting impacts of this are. Most national forecasters are looking at really the forecast for 2021 not really being affected at this point, maybe down by 1/10, but most of the impact to be concentrated in the second quarter to the end of this year.
All right, so there you go. A little bit of everything there. We got, see, she's coughing in. Make sure when you cough, you go right there with it. Absolutely. Guys, we certainly appreciate the time, and hopefully we'll have you back on for some positive economic news. And Dr. Jennifer, hope we don't have to have you come back in here at all for real, but we do appreciate it.
I'm happy to come back. Of course, things change, and I'm always happy to give an update.
Absolutely. We hope you had some stock in toilet paper and hand sanitizer. That's for sure here. All right, well, coming up after a quick break, Senator John Boozman joins us from D.C. on how the coronavirus is impacting the nation's capital. You're watching Capitol View Sunday morning.
Sold it, sold it, sold it.
Attention real estate and equipment buyers. Check out what's coming up on the Wilson Auction blog. Lakefront properties on Greers Ferry Lake and Lake Hamilton. Land in Quitman, Batesville, Hot Springs, and Conway. Commercial property in Little Rock, Hot Springs, and Bologna. Equipment and personal property including trucks, tractors, mowers, boats, UTVs, and an FJ40. All selling at auction. Download the Wilson Auctioneers app and bid now.
Sold it, sold it, sold it.
Having dental pain? You need to call the professionals at DDS Dentures and Implant Solutions. We offer implants starting at $1,400. Call to make your appointment today.
Oh, show the world your beautiful smile.
Hi, I'm Missy Gibson. My family and I would like to invite you to see all that John Gibson Auto Sales has to offer. We have one of the largest, most diverse, and newest inventory of any buy here, pay here dealers in the state. We have cars, trucks, SUVs, motorcycles, ATVs, campers, performance trailers, and boats. Whether you have good credit, bad credit, or no credit, we will finance you. Check us out at johngibsonautosales.com and we will have your purchase ready when you get here.
Nothing says spring like a brand new family. And compared to our competition, nobody has a newer family than Hyundai, including 3 new SUVs in the last 2 years. And at the Hyundai Spring Sales Event, you'll save big on all of them, even our littlest one. Get big savings on all of our new family members at the Hyundai Spring Sales Event, going on now.
Get up to $1,250 in total savings or 0% APR, plus $500 on a new Santa Fe. Visit buyhyundai.com today.
Don't let sinking concrete steal value from your home, or worse. Before it claims another victim, call Redeemers Group.
We fix sinking concrete safely and neatly with our patented foam polylevel. It's fast and clean and only from Redeemers Group.
Watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back into Capitol View. Well, amidst the corona chaos ramping up in Arkansas, the federal government is working on provisions to help states and to combat the spread of COVID-19. Joining us now from D.C., Senator John Boozman. Senator, we appreciate your time this morning. How are things up there in D.C. right now?
Well, thank you, Jay, for having me. It's busy. This is certainly the coronavirus is a real concern. We're working very, very hard on that. The reality is that for most Americans, most Arkansans, the risk is low because it does seem to affect those that are in the senior age group. We're blessed. We've got the #1 infectious disease network in the world. We can be very proud of that. So we're working hard now to provide legislation to make sure that whatever we need to keep families and communities safe.
And speaking of that legislation, I know the initial coronavirus bill wasn't well received over there in your chamber. What are we looking at possibly changing, maybe even adding in here as we kind of get into the weeks to come?
Well, we've had 2 things going on, Jay. We've got the $7.8 billion that we just passed, and we did that in a very bipartisan way. That provides funding for vaccines, all of those kind of things. About $6.2 million at least will come to the state of Arkansas immediately to help our infectious disease network so that we can go forward with the disease. So we've got the funding piece, and certainly if we need more funding, we'll come back. The other concern is, what do you do about people that we're encouraging to stay home from work and things like that, hourly employees, the effect on the business community. So we're talking about small business loans, just a number of things. Again, trying to see if we can make arrangements to help the single mom that is struggling to begin with, and then all of a sudden, they can't go to work because it's shut down. So there's lots of things. So we're working with the president, working with our friends on the other side of the aisle to come up with some measures that will help us control this serious situation.
And even beyond the virus itself, you kind of touched on a little bit with small businesses, but what's being looked at right now, obviously with the economy, just even looking this past week at the stock market, how much of a roller coaster ride that has been. What are we looking at on a national level to sort of calm Wall Street down, and obviously there's that trickle-down effect?
I really think, Jay, the most important thing that we do is that we demonstrate that we're getting a handle on this. Certainly it's going to increase. Right now, the people that are in control of the decisions are the people in the white coats. I mentioned we're blessed. We've got the #1 infectious disease network in the country. They really are making a lot of these decisions that are so very important. So we need to control the disease. It's going to get bigger. We're blessed. We've got 300+ million people. We've got a nation that has 4 million square miles. So it is going to expand. The question is how much? So all of the things that they're putting in place are designed to prevent that. And eventually the markets, I think, will have confidence in that. We can do some other things, though, because businesses are struggling. And, the economy is essentially shut down to a large extent. So we're working hard. There was talk of a payroll tax and those kind of things. That hasn't been received very well, but just a number of things to see how we can help those that are in the business community, our employees, our employers, to make sure that people are taken care of, so they actually can stay home without suffering greatly and help control this thing, which is the most important thing.
And I know helping to control it right now, I know one of the #1 concerns right now is just testing, and not only just the number of tests, but sort of the response. It seems like it takes a little while for those things to sort of be confirmed, and everything kind of works up the chain to the CDC. Is there anything being done to sort of move that process along?
Well, Congress is really pressing hard. Everyone is pressing hard at the state level. And let me just say how much I appreciate I'm an optometrist and eye doctor, and all of us understand how hard the men and women are on the front lines, our providers that are doing such a great job and you know, truly are so skilled. So we need to support them. Right now, the testing is difficult, and that's been something that we've really failed at. They tell us that's going to be taken care of very, very shortly. Really, the backlog is test kits themselves, but not so much that. It's just getting the testing done. And so there's been some jam-up points now. Dr. Fauci, who is you know, kind of the guy in this, basically what he's advocated, what we're going to do is just kind of allow lessen some of the rules, allow the public sector, along with the private sector, to join forces and see if we can greatly expedite this thing. But that's been the real jam point now. What's happening in the short term, though, is as people are identified, they're treating them as if they have the virus, if they have the symptoms, and asking them to, you know, to quarantine themselves, which even if they had bad flu would be appropriate also. So we're doing the right things, but we do need to know exactly what the numbers are, and that will greatly help us. I think that we'll have that ability in the next few days.
All right, switch gears here. I know you've been working on some other things. There are some other things that are actually happening up there in Washington, but a veteran suicide bill that you've been working on. Kind of what's that one about?
Well, this is really important. For the last several years, we've been working hard on veteran suicide. We've spent a lot more money, a lot more resources, and yet the number of suicides have not gone down. And so what we are saying is, hey, we got to do something different. And so we're able to pass out of committee not too long ago a big bill, all-encompassing. Part of that was a part that myself and Senator Warner put in place, and that really has to do with metrics. We want to evaluate the programs. Now the only way that we evaluate what we're doing is based on the amount of money that we're spending and if you have access. But we want to know, are these programs that we're spending so much money on, are they effective? You know, are they actually doing the job? The other thing is that the VA itself can't do it. Only 6 of the people that commit suicide are in the VA system. There's about 20 a day. The rest of those are outside of the system. How do we capture those? So we're working with the private sector. There's a number of people that just do a great job in these areas, and so trying to work giving them vouchers to identify these people, get them in their programs, and then send them to the VA for further help as needed. I think that's the way to go. So all of these things are being done in a very bipartisan way. You know, the nice thing, we hear a lot about all of the stuff that goes on here regarding you know, the lack of bipartisanship. These are areas where Republicans and Democrats work together very, very well, and we want to take care of the veterans in the sense that, you know, these aren't freebies. These are things that were promised to them, and again, that's what it's all about.
Well, hopefully you can get that through fairly calmly here, because we know up there in D.C., nothing ever really comes that easy. Senator John Boozman, we appreciate you taking a little time for us this morning.
Well, thank you for having me, and again, about such a very, very important topic.
Absolutely. We'll do it again soon, boss.
Appreciate it.
All right. And when we come back, we take a look at your top political news of the week. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
the new Natural Elements mattress lineup exclusive to FFO Home. The Queen Select mattress fits your budget for just $398, or try this Optima for just $598. American-made mattresses in stock and ready to take home today. FFO Home, lowest prices every day.
Every year, people are injured or killed when they come into contact with the power line. More than shark attacks, tornadoes, even snake bites. Power lines may not look scary, but they're more dangerous than you know. Keep your distance. Keep your life. Entergy.
Come and enjoy a new experience in shopping for your home. At Aladdin Rugs and Home Decor, we have over 5,000 rugs in the latest colors and styles. Bring your pillows, your pillow shams, and sizes. We will help you select the perfect rug. We're #1 in customer service with 15,000 square feet of rugs, unique home decor, wallpaper, and flooring. Remember, buy today, take it home today, and save. Why wait?
Will Invisalign aligners really work for my smile?
Is there a better alternative to braces?
Only Invisalign aligners use SmartTrack technology.
It moves teeth more comfortably and predictably, and in many cases, it works faster than braces.
Spring is coming, so it's time to get started. But first things first, call True Green for a healthy lawn, guaranteed. Millions of homeowners like you trust us to give them a lawn they can live on. Start saving today. Get 50% off your first lawn application.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me.
That was perfect.
But I heard every word.
This spring, refresh your living room at FFO Home. Kick back and relax in the Owen Power recliner, complete with cup holders, and give a touch of affordable luxury to your home with a genuine leather Odell sofa, only $698. Stop by today for comfort you can count on and the lowest prices guaranteed.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back into Capitol View. The coronavirus keeps taking swings. This time, the Louisiana primary goes down. Louisiana Secretary of State Kyle Ardoin announced on Friday next month's presidential preference primary has been postponed due to COVID-19 concerns.
April 4th primary election until June 20th and postponing the May 9th general election until July 25th.
Louisiana is the first state in the nation to postpone a primary since the outbreak of the virus. As of Friday morning, there were 33 presumptive positive cases of the coronavirus in 8 Louisiana parishes. The Canadian Prime Minister's office confirmed that Sophie Trudeau, wife of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, has tested positive for coronavirus on Thursday. Sophie Trudeau became sick when she returned from a trip to the UK. She is said to be feeling better and following the advice of doctors by self-isolating. The Prime Minister will also undergo a self-quarantine for 14 days. Justin Trudeau says he has not exhibited any symptoms yet. And Canada's House of Commons voted on Friday morning to shut down for at least 5 weeks to help ensure lawmakers do not contribute to the spread of the coronavirus. The length of time away could be extended if necessary, and in the interim, House of Commons committees can be recalled if needed. This move means Canada's federal budget, scheduled to be tabled on March 30th, will now be delayed. Trudeau says he will be continuing his duties during a self-isolation, according to his office. The Hellenic Olympic Committee decided to suspend the remainder of the Olympic torch relay through the country to avoid attracting crowds because of the coronavirus. The Tokyo 2020 Olympics torch relay got underway on Thursday when the flame was lit by the rays of the sun in ancient Olympia in a scaled-down ceremony overshadowed by the coronavirus pandemic. But HOC said the opening leg of the relay in the southern town of Sparta attracted unexpectedly high crowds, forcing it to suspend the remaining stops. The handover of the flame to the Tokyo Games organizers would take place as scheduled on March 19th in Athens, where the first modern Olympics were held in 1896. No spectators will be allowed to attend that ceremony, but Tokyo 2020 officials are continuing their plans for a torch relay in Japan. In other political news, senators joined local mental health professionals from Indiana, Iowa, and Texas Wednesday on Capitol Hill. They're calling on Congress to extend funding they say is critical to help more people to get access to mental health treatment. Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow and Missouri Republican Roy Blunt say Congress should renew the, quote, Excellence in Mental Health Act to continue and expand funding mental health clinics in more than a dozen states. The funding is set to expire soon.
The bottom line is we are not going to wait anymore. It's time to act.
If you don't get diagnosed, you don't get treated.
Blunt and Stabenow say these programs that provide aggressive mental health treatment keep people out of jail and out of the emergency rooms. The program expires in May. Iraqi soldiers arrived at the site of a U.S. airstrike that targeted Iranian-backed militia weapons caches. The airstrike hit the weapons storage area at the Kerbala airport that's under construction. The U.S. hit a number of sites belonging to Iranian-backed militia in Iraq after a rocket attack killed 2 U.S. troops and a British soldier. The Defense Department said the strikes bombed 5 weapon storage points used by the Kataib Hezbollah militants. A civilian construction worker was killed at Kerbala. Iraq's military condemned the airstrikes and said 6 people were killed and the strikes were a violation of its sovereignty. And we are back to wrap it up after this. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
Tonight,
she's been through 67 surgeries. She teaches me every day.
The show that changes lives is back.
This is our chance to make a difference.
The Wall returns with a chance at $13 million. The Wall premieres tonight on NBC.
Little Big Shots has shown me just how magical kids can be.
Nice phone you got, Melissa.
This guy is out there literally saving the world.
I hope I can dump a bunch of trash on you.
Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And that is it for today's show. Make sure you take us on the go with the Capitol View podcast. You can get that wherever you get your podcasts. We're back with an all-new Capitol View next week. Stay safe out there. Wash your hands. We'll see you next week.